The afternoon sun baked the asphalt at Fort Henderson's main gate, heat shimmering off the faded guard post like a mirage. Private Miller leaned against the booth window, sunglasses slipping down his nose, trading lazy jokes with Sergeant Cole. Their uniforms were wrinkled, name tapes half peeled, rifles slung carelessly over their shoulders. From the highway came the low hum of an engine, a black SUV, dust curling behind it. It slowed to a stop at the checkpoint. The driver, a civilian, didn't speak. The passenger door opened, and a woman stepped out, early 40s, calm, steady eyes, her posture crisp even in civilian clothes. She carried a small leather folder, nothing more. Miller straightened slightly, but didn't bother to salute. "Ma'am, this is a restricted area," he said, smirking. She met his gaze, voice level. "I'm here to report for duty." Laughter broke from the booth. Miller spread his hands. "Sure you are, ma'am. And I'm the president." The wind carried the silence that followed. Her eyes didn't blink. They had no idea who they were talking to. "Before I tell you what happened next, tell me, have you ever seen respect turn on a dime? Watch this." Fort Henderson had once been a name that carried weight. Soldiers used to speak of it with pride. A post known for precision, spotless drills, and the kind of discipline that made recruits into warriors. But that was years ago. Now, its paint peeled from the barracks walls, grass grew too tall along the walkways, and the sound of laughter in formation had turned into something else, a dull mix of complaint and carelessness. Rumors had traveled through command channels faster than paperwork ever could. Missed inspections, late roll calls, officers too comfortable in their chairs, and NCOs who stopped caring about sharpness because no one higher up does. A base once full of pride now ran on fumes and excuses. That was the Fort Colonel Evelyn Reed had inherited, or rather, chosen. She wasn't assigned here by chance. She had requested it, knowing exactly what she was walking into. Her record already spoke louder than any introduction could. 2 tours overseas, multiple commendations, and a history of rebuilding units others had written off as hopeless. Her methods weren't loud or brutal. They were precise, patient, surgical. She didn't crush problems. She exposed them to the light until they fixed themselves or disappeared. When the orders came through approving her transfer to Fort Henderson, Reed made a quiet decision. She wouldn't arrive in full uniform with flags waving and salutes snapping. She wanted to see the truth, the unfiltered version of her new command, before the masks went on. So she packed her folder, left the ribbons and brass in her luggage, and drove herself to the gate in civilian clothes. The drive had been long and quiet. Out past the hills, the desert rolled into endless heat. She caught her reflection in the side mirror. Sharp features, faint lines at the corner of her eyes, and a small scar near her left temple from an old training accident. That scar, she often said, was her favorite teacher, a reminder that even the best stumble if they stop paying attention. Her mind wandered as she neared the base. She'd been warned this place was different, too relaxed, too informal. Commanders rotated through like revolving doors, none lasting long enough to make real change. But Reed had built her career on turning chaos into order. When she pulled up to the checkpoint and saw 2 slouching guards joking in the sun, she knew instantly the reports were true. She didn't expect them to recognize her face, but she did expect protocol. The salute that never came told her everything she needed to know. Inside that moment of silence, she saw the real challenge ahead. Not a broken base, but a forgotten one. And that was exactly why she'd come. The sun hung over Fort Henderson like a punishment. The air shimmered, heavy with heat, the kind that glued a uniform to your back and drained the will out of even the sharpest soldier. But for Private Miller and Sergeant Cole, it was just another lazy afternoon at the gate, the kind that never seemed to end and didn't require much effort to get through. Miller was leaning against the booth again, a bag of chips in one hand, crumbs speckling his chest. "I swear, Cole, we should start charging for tours," he said between bites. "Every week it's another civilian saying they're meeting someone important." Cole grunted without looking up, adjusting his cap. "Just make sure you don't get us written up again. Remember last month's audit? "Relax, Sarge," Miller said, waving him off. "This place couldn't care less. Henderson's a ghost base. No one visits, no one checks." That's when the black SUV rolled up. Miller straightened just enough to look busy, tossing the chip bag on the counter. The driver said nothing, eyes forward. The passenger door opened, and the same woman from before stepped out, civilian clothes, no rank visible, calm as if the world outside the fence didn't touch her. "Afternoon, ma'am," Miller started, voice flat, bored. "Can I help you?" She held out a leather folder. "Colonel Evelyn Reed. Reporting to assume command of Fort Henderson. Here are my transfer orders." Cole froze mid-step. Miller blinked once, then laughed. "Ma'am, anyone can print a paper like that." "I've seen high schoolers make fake IDs better than this." Cole stepped closer, squinting. "Let me see that, ma'am," he said, taking the folder. The tone in his voice was cautious now, unsure. The name looked real. The signatures, the stamps, all official. Still, it didn't fit what he expected. "Colonel Reed, huh? We weren't notified about any new CO." Reed's expression didn't change. "That's unfortunate, Sergeant, but those orders are current." Miller crossed his arms, smirk returning. "Look, ma'am, no offense, but we can't just let anyone claiming to be a colonel drive in. We got procedures." "Then follow them," she said softly. It was the kind of tone that didn't rise but somehow carried weight. Cole hesitated, then reached for the radio. "Gate control, this is Post 1, he said. "Got a situation here. Civilian female claims to be a Colonel Reed, reporting for command. Request confirmation." The radio crackled. No answer at first. The silence stretched. Cole tried again. Meanwhile, Miller kept talking, nervous energy turning into arrogance. "You know, ma'am, we've had reporters pull this trick before. Think they can get on base for a scoop. You got any idea what kind of clearance this place requires?" Reed didn't answer. She stood still, her eyes scanning the checkpoint, the crooked flagpole, the mud-stained boots by the door, the half-torn security sign. Inside her mind, a quiet thought settled. If this is how the gate looks, I can only imagine what the barracks are like. The radio finally hissed to life. "Post 1, stand by," came the voice from base command. "Verifying now." Cole nodded, but Miller wasn't done. "You could at least tell us what unit you're from, ma'am," he said. "Might speed things up." "3rd Armored Brigade," she replied evenly. Miller whistled low, pretending to take her seriously. "3rd Armored? That's a big claim." "Guess we'll see what command says." Minutes stretched into 20. The sun baked everything in sight. The asphalt shimmered. Her shadow barely moved. She didn't ask for shade, didn't step aside. She simply waited, posture straight, eyes steady. Cole shifted uncomfortably, glancing at her, then at the road. Something about her silence unsettled him. Miller kept checking his watch, tapping the booth counter, muttering. From inside the car, the driver finally spoke. "Colonel?" Reed didn't move her gaze. "Patience," she said quietly. Cole cleared his throat. "Ma'am, if you'll just wait a bit longer, we'll get this sorted." "I'm sure you will, Sergeant," she said, her tone still calm, almost kind. The desert wind picked up, pushing a swirl of dust across the gate. It clung to their boots, caught in the folds of their uniforms. For the first time, Cole noticed how crisp her stance was, how military it looked, even without the uniform. Miller tried to laugh again, but it came out weaker this time. "You'd think if she were really a colonel, someone would have told us." Cole didn't answer. He had the uneasy feeling he'd made a mistake. Then the radio clicked again, a voice sharper this time. "Post 1, this is command. Confirm, Colonel Evelyn Reed, incoming commander of Fort Henderson. Clear her immediately and stand by for escort." The booth fell silent. Miller's face drained of color. Cole froze, radio still in his hand, and Evelyn Reed didn't flinch. She simply looked at them both, steady, unblinking, like she'd known this moment was coming all along. But when Sergeant Cole finally got the call back from HQ, everything started to change. The static came first, a sharp crackle that made everyone flinch. Then the voice came through, clipped and unmistakably formal. Post 1. This is the base adjutant. You're speaking to Colonel Evelyn Reed. Let her through immediately. The words hung in the air, sharp as the desert heat. For a moment, no one moved. The hum of the SUV's engine was the only sound between them. Private Miller's smirk faltered, confusion twisting into disbelief. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Sergeant Cole stood rigid, radio still pressed to his ear, sweat dripping down the side of his face. "Colonel Reed?" he finally stammered, voice barely above a whisper. She turned to him, slow and steady, and nodded once. "That's correct." Cole swallowed hard and handed back the folder like it was a live grenade. Miller's hand twitched toward his cap, unsure whether to salute or just disappear into the ground. Reed tucked the folder neatly under her arm. "You've delayed a commanding officer from entering her own base," she said softly. The tone wasn't angry. That was what made it worse. Calm. Controlled. The kind of voice that carried the weight of command without ever needing to shout. Miller tried to speak. "Ma'am, we didn't know." "I know," she interrupted gently. That's the problem. The silence that followed was suffocating. A breeze moved through the gate, lifting dust into lazy spirals. Cole's hands trembled slightly as he straightened his uniform. Miller's jaw clenched, cheeks burning red under the sunlight. From down the road, the sound of engines grew. Low, steady, official. 2 black sedans appeared, dust pluming behind their tires. They rolled to a stop just beyond the checkpoint, tires crunching on gravel. The doors opened in unison. Out stepped a pair of officers, a lieutenant colonel and a major, both in immaculate dress uniforms. Their eyes locked on Reed, and they moved quickly, boots hitting the pavement in sync. "Colonel Reed," the lieutenant colonel barked, snapping to attention. "Ma'am, welcome to Fort Henderson." Every soldier at the gate froze. Cole blinked. Miller's hand shook as he fumbled to remove his sunglasses, as if seeing her clearly now for the first time. Reed nodded to the approaching officers. "At ease," she said. Her tone was even, composed, but the respect in their stance was unmistakable. The lieutenant colonel gestured toward the open car door. "Ma'am, command is standing by. Colonel Jackson wanted to greet you personally, but your arrival took him by surprise." "I noticed," Reed replied, eyes briefly shifting toward Miller and Cole. Cole's throat bobbed. "Ma'am, she raised a hand slightly. "Save it, Sergeant. You were following the standards as you understood them." She paused. "But those standards are about to change." The younger soldiers at the gate had gone quiet. 1 or 2 leaned out from behind the booth, whispering to each other. Word was spreading already. The woman in civilian clothes wasn't some visitor. She was the new commander. Miller's heart hammered in his chest. He'd been joking minutes ago. Now, the weight of what he'd said, and who he'd said it to, settled like lead in his stomach. Reed turned back to them, expression unreadable. "Gentlemen, I expect your gate to be the first line of respect for every person who enters this base. Today, it failed. Tomorrow, it won't." Her words landed like orders, clean and final. Then she turned toward the sedans. The lieutenant colonel stepped aside quickly, holding the door open for her. She climbed in without another glance at the guards. As the vehicles pulled away, Cole finally exhaled, shoulders slumping. "God help us," he muttered under his breath. Miller didn't answer. His hands were still shaking. The convoy rolled through the gate, disappearing down the long stretch of road that led to headquarters. The sun reflected off the glass, a flash of white that faded as it turned the corner. Back at the checkpoint, the base flag flapped weakly in the hot wind. Cole adjusted his cap and looked at Miller. "That woman's going to tear this place apart and rebuild it from scratch," he said quietly. Miller nodded, still pale. "Yeah, and we're the first lesson." The lieutenant colonel's voice echoed faintly from down the road. "Clear the post," and the reality settled over them like the desert heat they could no longer ignore. The salute that followed made every witness realize they'd just mocked their new commander. The following morning, the checkpoint looked different, not in structure, but in spirit. The same sun beat down, the same dust drifted across the road, but something in the air had shifted. Word had spread fast. The woman who'd been stopped at the gate wasn't a visitor. She was Colonel Evelyn Reed, and by the end of her first full day, the entire base knew it. Before sunrise, her black SUV rolled up again. This time, no one laughed. Miller and Cole were both at attention, uniforms sharp, boots polished to a nervous shine. The moment they spotted the vehicle, they straightened so fast you'd think a camera was watching. Reed stepped out calmly, sane folder in hand, sane expression. Quiet, unreadable. She paused in front of the gate, eyes scanning everything in slow, deliberate silence. The flagpole leaned slightly to the left. The base signage was chipped. Empty soda cans lay half-hidden near the booth. Even the paint along the guardrails had faded into a tired gray. She didn't say a word. She just looked, at the booth, at the half-torn roster pinned by tape, at the crooked clipboard left on the window ledge. Cole's throat clicked as he swallowed. Miller stood rigid, jaw locked, praying she wouldn't notice the sweat rolling down his temple. After what felt like hours, she turned toward them. "Do you two believe this is the standard of the United States Army?" The question wasn't shouted. It was quiet, frighteningly quiet. Cole tried to speak first. "Ma'am, we were going to repaint the rails this week." Reed's gaze cut through him. "Were you?" she asked. He hesitated. "Yes, ma'am." "Eventually," Miller added. "We've been short-staffed lately, ma'am. Just a few of us covering multiple shifts." Reed's tone stayed even. "And how much of that time did you spend leaning, eating, and laughing while you were supposed to be guarding this post?" Neither man answered. She nodded slightly, as if that silence told her everything she needed to know. "Report to my office at 1600 hours, she said. "Both of you." "Yes, ma'am," they replied in unison, voices shaky. She didn't dismiss them with anger, didn't lecture, didn't humiliate. She simply walked the length of the gate again, hands clasped behind her back, eyes sharp. The nearby maintenance crew stopped working as she passed. One soldier whispered to another, "That's her, the new CO, the one they tried to block yesterday." "She doesn't look mad," the other murmured. "That's what's scary." Reed overheard but didn't react. She'd seen this before, soldiers who'd forgotten what standards looked like, officers who hid behind paperwork instead of pride. When she reached the end of the inspection line, she turned back to Miller and Cole. "When I arrived yesterday, I didn't see two bad soldiers," she said evenly. "I saw the reflection of a command that stopped caring. I don't blame you for that. But I intend to fix it." Her eyes held theirs, steady, not unkind. "You will help me do it." Miller blinked, startled. "Ma'am, you heard me," she said. "If you were the first to show me what's broken, then you'll be the first to help rebuild it." She handed Cole a fresh notepad from her folder. "By 1600, I want a list of everything wrong with this gate, every detail. Procedures, structure, discipline. Nothing too small. If something's out of line, I want it written down." Cole nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am." "Good," she said. "Then we'll begin." Without another word, she turned and walked toward her vehicle. The officers standing near the admin building watched her pass. No salutes yet, just quiet curiosity. One of them muttered under his breath, "She's not like the others." Another replied, "No. She's calm, too calm." The SUV door closed and the vehicle rolled away, the sound fading into the morning. Back at the gate, Miller exhaled the breath he'd been holding. "You think she's going to write us up?" Cole shook his head. "No. She's going to do something worse." "What's that?" Miller asked. Cole's eyes tracked the road where the SUV disappeared. "Make us into soldiers again." And for the first time in years, the base gate stood silent, not from laziness, but from the weight of discipline settling back where it belonged. They packed the conference room with every company officer who still remembered how to button a collar. Dust lined the windowsills. A fluorescent bulb buzzed as if it wanted to be anywhere else. Evelyn Reed stood at the front without a podium, hands relaxed at her sides, eyes moving slowly from face to face. She waited until the last fold of chatter died. The silence worked like a reset switch. "You can't demand respect until you live it," she said, voice low and clear. "If the gate is weak, the heart is weaker. No theatrics, no slide deck." Just a sentence that hit like a hammer on soft metal. Somewhere in the back, a captain shifted, ready to deflect with a joke that would buy him comfort. Reed's gaze landed on him for half a second, and he went still. She nodded once. "Here's how this works," she continued. "We build a foundation. Standards you can touch. Standards you can greet every morning. We fix the small things so the big things have no choice but to follow." She pulled a notepad from her folder, a simple, worn thing with squared corners. Daily cleanliness inspections. Not ceremonial. Real. Sheets tight. Floors clean. Gear staged for immediate use. If you need a checklist to remember to be a soldier, you'll have one until you don't. Murmurs. The kind that taste like resistance. "Communication drills," she said. "Gate to HQ, HQ to motor pool, motor pool to range. Call and response until you can do it in your sleep, and then we do it some more. We will know who's speaking, who's listening, and who's responsible. No more, I thought someone else handled it. That phrase is banned." She let it settle. "Mentorship chains," she added. "Every lieutenant has a sergeant. Every sergeant has a private. No one floats. You are responsible for someone, and someone is responsible for you. If you show up wrinkled, your chain failed. If you show up late, your chain failed. If you show up ready, your chain worked. We will build habits that make excellence boring." A major raised his hand halfway. "Ma'am, the schedule will bend," Reed said. "The standard won't." She turned a page. "And about the gate. You saw it. You felt it. That was our first impression to the world, and it failed. Private Miller." Sergeant Cole. Chairs scraped. Miller and Cole stood from the second row, uniforms crisp, faces pale. "You stopped me," Reed said. "You were wrong. You were also the first mirror I needed, so you'll fix it." They swallowed in unison. "You will draft new security protocols," she continued. "From greeting to search to radio cadence to escalation to courtesy. You will test them against every scenario I can invent, and every scenario you can't imagine. You will own the gate. When people pass into Fort Henderson, they will pass through you." "Yes, ma'am," they said. Their voices didn't break. That was new. Reed looked back at the room. "All of you, listen to the next 4 words carefully. Direct. Personal. Accountability." Begins? No one breathed. Then the work started. Day 1 looked like embarrassment. Stacks of old mop heads, busted brooms, a supply closet that smelled like 100 forgotten lunches. Reed made a list with a pencil and didn't raise her voice. Officers made calls. Facilities moved. A corporal found paint behind a locked bin that hadn't been opened in a year. They pried it loose and rolled new lines along the walkway until the sun dropped and the paint shone like a promise. Day 2 sounded like a metronome. Radios clicking, voices crisp, names clear, timestamps exact. Post 1 to HQ, radio check. HQ copies. Lima Charlie. Post 1 to motor pool, status. Motor pool copies. 5 vehicles up, 2 in maintenance, 1 pending parts. Reed listened with her eyes closed, head tilted, as if tasting the cadence. "Again," she'd say, "again." And again they did it, until the stumbles disappeared. Day 3 smelled like detergent and old sweat. Barracks tossed like a storm had visited, then assembled back to attention. Sheets pulled tight enough to bounce a coin, not because the coin mattered, but because the discipline did. A private stared at his hands, red from scrubbing. His sergeant knelt beside him, not to berate, but to teach the angle that saves the wrist. "You'll thank me," the sergeant said. The private nodded and kept working. The mentorship chains formed like scaffolding. Lieutenants shadowed NCOs. NCOs learned names past the last 4 numbers. A sergeant who'd stopped believing in sharpness sat with a young specialist over coffee and found the switch behind his sarcasm. A father at home, tired, still trying. They wrote a plan for sleep, PT, and watch. 2 weeks later, the specialist looked taller. He hadn't grown. He had decided. At the gate, Miller and Cole turned into craftsmen. They wrote their first draft of protocols on recycled paper, then rewrote it clean. Reed read every line. "What do you say before you say no?" she asked. "Good morning, sir or ma'am," Miller answered. "Welcome to Fort Henderson. And after? State your business and present your ID for verification. Eye contact? Present. Friendly." "Professional," Cole said, eyes steady. "Tone? Warm? Clear. Non-negotiable." They drilled the steps like choreography. Greeting. Verify. Inspect. Search. Clear. They built failure points into the practice. False IDs, expired passes, vague answers, shaken hands, angry voices. They learned to control the pace like traffic cops in a storm, to slow things down without making them slow. Courtesy first, firmness always, escalation last. Reed walked the base every morning at dawn. She did it without announcement, without entourage, boots whispering against concrete before the sun had the nerve to be hot. She didn't leave notes. She didn't leave threats. She left presence. As she approached, soldiers straightened not because they heard her coming, but because they could feel the air change. She would pause at a formation, adjust a collar like a mother fixes a child's tie, and say only, "Good morning." It carried more weight than some speeches. Her steps carved a route into the base. PT field, barracks, motor pool, range, gate. The path turned into a ritual that taught everyone the same lesson. If the commander cares enough to show up, you care enough to be ready. A staff sergeant who had learned to disappear found himself waiting 10 minutes early, gloves already on, a checklist he'd made himself. Reed glanced at it, smiled once, and said, "Keep that." Make 10 more. Weeks stacked on weeks, sweat collected in boot treads. Lists shrank, then grew, because standards do that. They reveal more once you start meeting them. A busted hinge replaced. A cluttered office purged. A storage cage inventoried until the numbers finally told the truth. Officers stopped hiding behind email and started walking their lines. NCOs taught. Privates watched, copied, improved. Miller and Cole brought their final draft to Reed's office at 1600, like churchgoers delivering tithe. The document was lean, sharp, and unafraid. Reed read it quietly, pencil hovering, then set it down. "This is good," she said. "Now make it real." They trained the gate crew to the syllable. They practiced with volunteers. They practiced with skeptics. They practiced with a lieutenant who tried to glide through on rank alone and got stopped at step 3. He bristled. Cole held the line, voice respectful, body still. "Sir, our policy is the standard. I will clear you the same as everyone else." Reed watched from 10 yards away, said nothing, and felt the future clicking into place. The night shifts sharpened. The day shifts stopped making excuses for the night shifts. A new phrase replaced the old shrugs. "We own it." And ownership changed everything. One evening, during a windstorm that pushed grit into every open seam, a convoy rolled in early from the range, beat and hungry. The gate crew, tired, sore, and sandy, still ran the play as written. IDs. Manifests. Vehicle checks. A corporal in the second truck leaned out and said, "Come on, man, we've been out there for 12 hours. Miller's reply was gentle. "Then this next 30 seconds will be the easiest thing you do today." He smiled once, finished the check, and waved them through. The corporal raised a thumb without looking back. Respect, quiet and unadorned. Reed noticed small miracles disguised as routine. The brass at HQ noticed numbers, fewer late reports, cleaner inspections, quicker responses, tighter timelines. But on the ground, the miracles were simpler. Tension where there had been slack. Pride where there had been noise. Eyes that met eyes. Her dawn walks became lighter, not because the work was done, but because it was shared. She stopped by the gate one morning and found a laminated card posted at eye level. "We greet with respect. We verify with care. We protect with certainty." No signature. No signature. She didn't need one. Command called to ask what she needed. She asked for paint, light bulbs, and time. They laughed. then sent all three. The base shifted the way a body heals, quietly, cell by cell, until one day the mirror shows a different face. A visiting inspection team arrived unannounced and found nothing to scold. They found checklists that matched reality. They found lockers that opened straight and boots that looked walked in, not staged. They found a gate that felt like a handshake instead of a shrug. On a Thursday evening, Reed stood alone at the edge of the PT field and watched the last lights sink behind the motor pool. She listened to the murmur of a bass that was finally awake. She thought about the first day, the leaning, the laughter, the faded paint, and she smiled at the distance traveled. She didn't congratulate anyone. She didn't congratulate herself. She simply showed up again the next morning, before the sun, and walked. But 6 months later, no one recognized Fort Henderson anymore. 6 months later, the flag above Fort Henderson snapped bright and straight in the wind. The base looked almost unrecognizable. Paint lines clean as a ruler stroke, lawns cut to regulation height, vehicles parked in perfect formation. Even the air felt sharper, like the place had remembered how to breathe. At dawn, the entire garrison gathered on the parade field to accept the Regional Readiness Award, a citation that hadn't belonged to Henderson in over a decade. Cameras flashed, reporters murmured, and Colonel Evelyn Reed stood off to the side in pressed dress greens, hands folded behind her back. When the applause came, she didn't smile wide, just a small nod, the kind reserved for missions complete, but never over. Later that afternoon, with the ceremony dismantled and the day returning to routine, a black sedan approached the gate without prior notice. The guard team moved instantly, no hesitation, no confusion. Sunlight glinted off fresh paint and polished brass. Private Miller stood at the front, posture perfect, boots aligned with the white curb stripe. His voice carried steady over the hum of engines. "Good afternoon, sir." "Welcome to Fort Henderson. May I see your identification and travel orders?" Inside the car sat a visiting general from Regional Command, his expression curious. He handed over his credentials. Miller checked the laminate, scanned the barcode, verified the seal, and returned it with a precise salute. "Thank you, sir. Please wait one moment while I clear your entry." The radio exchange took less than 10 seconds. Clear, clipped, exact. The general watched, amused. "Impressive," he said when Miller stepped back to his window. "Tell me, son, who trained you to run a gate like that?" Miller's eyes gleamed with quiet pride. "Colonel Evelyn Reed, sir." For a heartbeat, the wind paused, carrying the name down the road like a flag unfurling. Behind the guard booth, a door opened. Reed stepped out. No fanfare, no escort, just her steady presence, arms crossed, a faint smile tracing the edge of her lips. She'd been observing the checkpoint's performance all afternoon, saying nothing, letting the work speak for itself. The general climbed from his car, adjusting his cap. When he saw her, he stopped mid-stride, the realization settling on his face. He snapped to attention and saluted sharply. "Colonel Reed," he said, voice ringing. "Outstanding work." "This base looks brand new." Reed returned the salute, calm and deliberate. "Not brand new, sir," she replied. "Just finally itself again." Cole stood nearby, clipboard tucked under his arm, monitoring the rotation schedule. He caught her eye, and she gave the smallest nod permission to continue. Traffic kept moving. The gate didn't stall even for the general. The visitors who passed through that afternoon felt it too. The rhythm, the pride, the sense that every soldier here understood their part in something bigger. The gate wasn't just an entry point anymore, it was the front line of respect. As the sun dipped, painting long gold lines across the road, Reed lingered beside the booth. Miller called out final checks, his voice crisp but easy, no arrogance left. Cole recorded times and shift transitions with care. The flag above them rippled, its reflection caught in the newly polished window. Reed looked up at it, quiet satisfaction softening her features. 6 months ago, this post had been a symbol of everything broken. Now it was the proof that leadership didn't have to roar to be heard. All it needed was consistency, belief, and the refusal to accept good enough. The general's convoy rolled off toward headquarters, and the gate returned to its steady rhythm, one vehicle at a time, one salute at a time. Reed stepped forward, straightened the edge of Miller's sleeve, and said simply, "Well done, Private." "Thank you, ma'am," he replied, and the words carried something they hadn't before, pride without fear. Reed turned toward the horizon, hands clasped behind her back. "Keep it that way," she said. "Every day, the same." "Yes, ma'am." The SUV waiting to take her back to command idled quietly, but she didn't move. She stood there a moment longer, watching the flag wave over the post that had learned how to stand tall again. And as the gate closed behind another passing convoy, Fort Henderson saluted, not with ceremony, but with precision, posture, and pride. It was no longer just a gate. It was a promise kept. She never yelled. She never needed to. Colonel Evelyn Reed rebuilt Fort Henderson the way a craftsman restores a monument, one gate, one standard, one soldier at a time. In the months that followed the inspection and the reforms, the base transformed into a living symbol of order and pride. Morning reveille echoed crisp and clear. Boots hit the ground in perfect rhythm, and the smell of fresh paint and polished brass carried through the air like a quiet reminder discipline had come home. You could see it in the faces of the soldiers, not fear, but ownership. They stood taller, spoke sharper, moved with a kind of confidence that didn't come from fear of punishment, but from pride in belonging to something worth protecting. The camera of memory panned slowly across the base, soldiers cleaning rifles shoulder to shoulder, laughter mixing with the sound of brushes sweeping the floor, officers walking alongside privates instead of ahead of them. The flag rises every morning, its fabric catching the first light, and the entire base pauses just for a heartbeat to honor what it represents. At the gate, the transformation is complete. The once slouching guards now carry themselves like the first line of America's defense. Private Miller adjusts a young recruit's salute with patient precision. Sergeant Cole oversees a drill with the firmness of a man who's learned humility the hard way. Their movements mirror the discipline that Reed breathed back into them, the kind that doesn't fade when the inspection ends. Reed walks the base quietly, eyes tracing the small signs of progress that no award could ever measure. A soldier picking up trash without being told, a corporal correcting a mistake with calm authority, a group of new recruits standing straight not because someone is watching but because they want to. Her footsteps stop near the main flagpole. The wind picks up, catching the hem of her uniform, carrying with it the faint echo of cadence drills from across the training field. For the first time in years, Fort Henderson feels alive, not loud, not perfect, but alive in the way only respect can make it. Reed's voice drifts over the scene, steady, reflective, and full of quiet conviction. If you want to change an army, start by changing what it salutes. The music swells, strings and drums woven together, not triumphant, but proud. Faces fade in sequence, Miller instructing recruits, Cole leading roll call, young soldiers standing at attention as the flag reaches the top of its climb. And then, silence. Just the flag waving against the sky and the calm of a base that finally remembered who it was. Leadership isn't about shouting. It's about showing. It's about standing firm when others lean, caring enough to correct, and believing that respect, once earned, can rebuild anything. Fort Henderson didn't just change under Colonel Reed. It rediscovered itself. The sun sank low over Fort Henderson, painting the horizon in shades of gold and crimson. The wind was calm now, carrying only the faint sound of boots striking pavement and the crisp echo of a salute. At the gate, the same gate that once denied her entry, Colonel Evelyn Reed stood quietly, hands behind her back, eyes steady, posture unbending. Before her, the guard stood in perfect form, movements clean and precise. Every gesture spoke of pride and purpose. The railings gleamed in the last light of day, the flag above them catching fire in the sunset. Reed took a breath, the kind that carried both memory and peace. Once, this place had been a symbol of failure. Now it was proof that respect could be rebuilt, one standard at a time. Her voice lingered as the screen began to fade. Once, they told her she couldn't pass. Now she leads every soldier through the same gate, standing taller, prouder, ready. The flag waved one last time as the music swelled. If this story inspired you, salute in the comments, and subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories. Because every salute starts with respect.